I'm Erwin Raphael McManus, and this is the Genius of podcast. Today I have a really special guest. He's one of my closest friends. His name is Jon Gordon. He's the author of 24 different books. Probably the most popular is The Energy Bus. He has a book called The Garden, where one of his characters is called Mr. Erwin. Jon speaks to Fortune 500 companies and major league sporting organizations, whether it's the NFL, NBA, whether it's college football teams from the Los Angeles Dodgers to Clemson University football team. He has this amazing ability to infect a culture with optimism and positive mindsets that elevates talent to greatness. And so I'm really excited. We're going to talk about the particular genius inside of Jon Gordon. We're going to talk about the genius of positivity. And we're going to talk about how to transfer some of that positive genius into your life. So would you welcome Jon Gordon to the Genius of podcast? Jon Gordon, it is so exciting to have you here on the Genius of.
Great to be with you.
And I know that you would never identify yourself or call yourself a genius. And yet we're here because I am identifying some incredible genius inside of you. And I want people to get to know just a little bit of your journey. And more importantly than like getting to where you are now, because that's a lot of times people want to get where you are now, but they don't really understand the journey and the struggle and the challenges that were part of the process.
Right.
So I kind of want to go to the beginning of the story as if the people listening don't know anything about you. And I mean, you've written, 26 different books?
24 books now. 24.
Okay, see, I'm a future, so I'm looking into the future. And 24 different books. Probably your best-selling book has been The Energy Bus.
Energy Bus.
And it's kind of put you on the map, but not right away. It took a little while for that book to catch momentum and explode. And you've written a book that uses a character with me in it, called The Garden.
The Garden.
And your most recent book is Relationship Grit.
Relationship Grit, and then Stick Together came out after
That's
that.
right.
And then Row the Boat just came out, the one I wrote with PJ Fleck.
You are prolific. You write books the way other people cook pancakes, or it's amazing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the process, because I think there's genius in your writing process that would be so helpful to many people. But more than that, you have a tremendous impact in some really, really interesting mediums, whether it's sports and business, and which I think are the two most significant arenas that you really are making an impact in. A lot of impact with coaches and key players, teams that have won championships. Mm-hmm. It seems like every time I turn on ESPN, there's a team that you've been working with, a coach you've been working with, players you've been working with, that team wins the national championship, wins the NBA championship, wins the Major League Baseball championship. And so you seem to know how to put people into a championship mindset.
Or I show up at the right time.
Yeah, or you're
as they're on the rise, I show up, I speak when they're just getting going, or perhaps the coach recognizes that this team has potential, mm-hmm. and they're ready to go to the next level, or they're looking for something. And I seem to always show up when that team is just about to embark and go on the next level.
It kind of makes you a great a leadership surfer. You know how to catch the right wave,
right.
And there's genius in that.
Right.
But I also think it's that coaches know that their team is on the brink of greatness, and they just need to add some component, some element to it, that they need to bring an outside voice to it.
Great point. I believe that too.
Yeah, and that's a part of their genius, is
right.
they know how to bring together what's necessary to achieve greatness in that moment. And I think it's true for you in the business sector. So many people in the business world have brought you in to help their companies move toward a healthy culture.
Right.
And that's in many ways a part of what's happening now. But I want to go back. I know you're from Long Island?
Long Island, New York. Smithtown is where I was born and where I grew up. A place called Wisconsin, which is actually a smaller part of Smithtown.
Well, I can hear a little bit of that East Coast accent is still in you. But I mean, we're personal friends, and I've known you for quite a while. And one of the unique things I know about you is that you are 99% Ashkenazi Jew. And but you were not raised in a Jewish home, in a sense, because your biological father is Jewish, but the dad who raised you is Italian.
Right, and my mom was Jewish. So both
Right.
parents were biologically Jewish by heritage.
Right.
And my biological father left when I was a year old. And so my mom was a single mom for a little while. Jewish grandparents, very culturally Jewish, but not religious Jewish. And then my mom married my dad, technically my stepfather, who raised me since I was 5 years old. He was a New York City police officer.
Wow.
Undercover narcotics, very Italian, and a very loving man. Not the most positive guy in the world, but a very loving dad. And I'll never forget, he said to me and my brother, he said, I want you to call me Dad. I'm going to raise you as my own. And he did. And that love and who he was really had a huge impact on me and my life. So we celebrated Hanukkah, we celebrated Christmas, we celebrated all the holidays, but we never went to church, never went to temple. It wasn't about that at all. It was about just family gathering. I still remember the Italian family gatherings for Easter and Christmas in the basement in Queens, New York,
Right.
with a spread of food that we ate all day long. So that was the kind of family I grew up in. Then we'd go to the Jewish family for the Jewish holidays, and we'd celebrate Passover, and we had the Jewish side. So culturally, I had these.
So you had both cultures really influencing who
cultures.
you were, both Jewish and
Yeah.
Italian.
A lot of food, a lot of guilt.
And I think that might actually transcend just not only just Jewish and Italian culture, but a lot of passion.
Right.
Yeah,
a lot of passion, a lot of fire. Not the most positive family, a lot of probably negativity and fighting, drama.
Did that negativity seep into you and become a part of who you were as a person?
I would say so. I mean, I think I was naturally wired towards negativity. And
Not a lot of people would say that about themselves.
Yeah, but I believe I was. I mean, I was an optimistic person in terms of sports, and I wanted the starting position. I believed I can get it. I did well in school.
Is that optimistic or is that competitive?
Probably competitive, but optimistic in terms of I thought I can go do something.
That you could accomplish?
I could accomplish it. I saw a great future for myself. Like I wanted to be president of the United States when I was a kid, right? So I saw that I could do something great. I wanted to influence.
It would have been really helpful if you had become president, by the way.
Exactly. I think I could do a better job than most lately. So in my journey, yes, I had this positivity part of me, but naturally negative in terms of worry and fear and concern. And I would say I probably struggled with depression at one point. I remember telling my mom I was depressed and I was suicidal and I wanted to kill myself. And
How old were you?
Probably at 12, 13-year-old
wow.
range, which is when the hormones and everything is going on. And my mom freaked out so bad. Like, what do you mean you're crazy? And when she went all crazy, I went, Mom, it's okay, I'm fine. And I think that snapped me out of it. I was like more worried about her being okay than what I was dealing with. Probably need therapy now to deal with that. but it was something that I was trying to help her with instead of dealing with my own probably issues at the time. But yeah, I naturally went toward the negative in those ways. And then just had a lot of issues and challenges, I would say, growing up, probably with the abandonment of my father biologically. We'd go over his house on weekends. And
so you did know him?
I knew him, and we would see him on weekends and so forth. But it was always awkward. It never felt like a safe place. Never felt like we really belonged. And so we would go over there, and we even took a couple of vacations together that always turned disastrous. And I would get sick and something bad would happen. And so there was always challenges along that way. I never felt really at home in many ways. And then on our side, like my dad who raised me, my stepfather, he had 3 children from a previous family, from a previous marriage.
So you're in a really complex.
So complex. I wrote an article, an essay in college called "The Quiet Calm in the Midst of Turmoil." Because when it was just us, it was like this quiet calm of a family. But then we always had turmoil coming in and out.
So what was it like being a part of his extended family?
Really close now, love them now. When we were younger, I'm the youngest of all. And so they were struggling in their adolescent years. They really had a lot of challenges living with their mom, not having their dad there. And so they would come over and they would bring in a lot of their challenges and issues along the way. With
a lot of their hurt and brokenness
came into our family and my life. So I had to learn how to almost really just focus on like my world and not allow all that to come in. And I always saw people moving in and out of my life, which I think in many ways was easy for me to just let go of people at different times. And when my dad would be mad at, his kids, like, well, they're out of the family. And so you basically were like, okay, they're not part of our family now. But then they'd come back to, okay, they're back in. And so it was always like this struggle of, and this give and take of, okay, they're in, they're out. Who do we need to love? Who should we hate right now? And it was a lot of that. Because my dad was a New York cop, so he always saw the world in terms of like, the world is out to get you, and you have to be strong to take on this world.
Wow. All right, so you grew up in this deeply complex family, blended family on both sides. And you have the two cultures. You have a culture of maybe pessimism and negativity, almost paranoia.
Right.
It's us against the world. The world's out to get you. And it seems to me that one of the places you found some refuge was in lacrosse.
Right. I would say sports in general.
Yeah, sports in general.
Played football, basketball was a lot better when I was younger than when we play. and then started playing lacrosse when I was in 9th grade.
Wow, that's really young.
Yeah, in 9th grade. So never played before. Tried to quit. Wasn't very good. The coach said, "You're not quitting. One day you're going to play in college." Tony Chiazza. He said, "One day you're going to play in the Ivy League."
Wow.
I didn't even know what the Ivy League was. I didn't. My parents weren't big on college in terms of like, they weren't big, educators, or they didn't go to college themselves even. So for me, it was, okay, Ivy League sounds good. I don't know what it is, but I'll keep on playing. So I kept on playing, and would go to Cornell University, and that experience definitely changed me and impacted me in many ways.
That's amazing. So you're to Cornell. Do you have a pretty strong sense of self and a strong sense of identity at that time, or are you still trying to figure out who you were, or did you feel like there was greatness inside you then, or were you living with a sense that you couldn't figure out what you were great at? What was going on inside of your own journey then?
Yeah, going there, I had a sense of confidence from athletics.
Okay.
I had been named All-County. I had a great senior year. We went to the playoffs, had all these awards and recognition. So I went there with a lot of confidence, like kid from Long Island, had the gold chain, the tank top, the Camaro. I was straight out of Long Island.
You have photographs?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we want some photographs sent our way. We're gonna post these.
It was so bad that my friends in college wore my regular clothes as their Halloween costumes. So not much has changed since then. So they did that. That's true. But I learned about culture there. A lot of my friends were wealthy and had privilege, and my parents never made more than $30,000 a year, combined. So my dad retired from the police force after 20 years, and so he lived off his retirement, started a nonprofit, a youth league, actually, a youth sports league. Wow. And so he was very involved in that, and I played for those youth sports leagues. So I went there with a sense of confidence and belief that I could do well there. Didn't know what my genius was, but I wanted to go to law school. I knew that. And I wanted to get into politics. So that was sort of what was driving me at that time. I was a government economics major, but I would say I really majored in lacrosse, in college.
So ironically, everything that was driving you in terms of a larger ambition were things that you ended up never doing.
Which is really...
Or not succeeding in.
Well, yeah, because I ran for city council of Atlanta when I moved to Atlanta after college.
How old were you then?
I was 26, 27.
And how did that go for you?
I walked door to door to 7,000 houses. So again, competitive, ambitious, right?
Hardworking, wow.
Raised $30,000 from various people, put a billboard up in the middle of town. I mean, I was winning. I was winning the election. They did polls and I was winning. And then everyone came after me in a very negative way because they saw me as a threat. We were running against a 20-year incumbent. And so there was 3 of us running against a 20-year incumbent. They knew that they had to get me out of the way to get into a runoff with the incumbent. So everyone started to attack me, who was in the lead, to try to get into the runoff.
Wow.
And at 26, 27, with no experience, never did this before, it was probably one of the most negative experiences of my life.
I take it you did not win.
I did not win. At the time, I thought it was, the end of my life. I felt like my dream is over. But I realized you have to lose a goal to find your destiny.
No, that's good.
Because I had this goal, but I had to lose that to find what I was really meant to do. Because I might still be in Atlanta. Maybe I would have run for mayor, maybe would have run for something else, but I would have been dealing with potholes as a city councilman, dealing with that instead of finding my purpose and calling doing this. But yeah, it was a cool journey, but government economics led me to do that. I went to law school for a year and a half. Before that, dropped out of law school, realized it wasn't for me. Actually, law school came after that because I lost the election. I said, what am I going to do now? Because I had a restaurant at the time, and and after running for city council, I went to law school.
Good. Now, I know you had a restaurant. You were a bartender.
Yep.
And so you were bartending a place and you bought that restaurant?
Next door. So I moved to Atlanta right after college. So I graduated college, and I had a girlfriend in Texas, and we broke up. And so I drove back from Texas, heartbroken, went to go live with my parents. I'm waiting tables at the local Hula Hands restaurant.
So you're really going places.
And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? All my friends are working on Wall Street. They have got great jobs out of Cornell. And here I am waiting tables at Hula Hands, living with my parents. Like, my life is over. So I am thinking at that point, I got to do something. Like, I've got to do something with my life. So I started asking people, hey, where should I move? I want to move to an up and coming city. And people said either San Fran or Atlanta. Atlanta was on the East Coast. I said, all right, I'm going to Atlanta. It's a young city. It's happening right before the Olympics. And I moved down to Atlanta with a car, some clothes. I get a job at the Hula Hands in Atlanta. So I transfer there. I'm waiting tables. And I remember I'm making like $20 a shift. And while I'm waiting tables, I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be a better way to make more money. And so I'm supporting myself at that point. I signed up for Emory. I got into Emory to get my master's in teaching. So I have that going on, but I've got to make some more money. So I decided to walk around Buckhead one day, Buckhead, Atlanta, where all the bars and restaurants were, and I'm looking for a bartending job. And I showed up to this bar. The guy was sitting right outside. It was a place called Bar. I'm like, okay, I could do that. And I said, hey, you looking for bartenders? He said, yeah, we're just opening up and we're looking. He goes, have you bartended before? I said, I absolutely have. I had never bartended in my life. He goes, you got to try out tonight. You got to try out tonight.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went home. I turned on the movie Cocktail. I put that DVD, DVD, it was actually a VCR at the time.
Training video.
Yeah, so watch Cocktail, Tom Cruise flipping the bottles. I bought a book on recipes. Couldn't remember the recipes. Showed up that night. And next thing you know, people are like coming in and ordering all sorts of drinks that I do not know how to make. And I'm working with this guy, Thad. I'm like, Thad, what do I do? He goes, serve it red, serve it with a smile. And so people are coming, I'm just acting like I know what I'm doing, and I'm just grabbing this and going like that, and people are walking away going like, this is horrible. At the end of the night, they came up to me, they said, hey, it's clear you have no idea what you're doing, but we love your energy.
Wow.
And we like the way you interact with people and your attitude, so we're gonna hire you. So we're gonna train you. So I got the job, and then I learned how to bartend. Next thing you know, I'm making great money. One guy was stealing at the top bar, which was downstairs, and they let him go and they put me in that spot. So now I'm making $600 every weekend just bartending, cash, back in the 90s, while I'm getting my master's in teaching. Doing that, I'm making money. So now I'm making that money, which I thought, okay, it's great. But I'm standing on the corner, and there was a place next door to us called Beasley's. Richard Beasley was the owner. And Buckhead at the time was transitioning from a restaurant place to more of a bar and nightlife place. And I had this vision of Richard Beasley's place, because it had nice wood, of a place that had live acoustic music in a nice wood setting. And I said, hey, Richard, I'm on the corner talking to him. Would you ever sell this place? He goes, everything's for sale. I'm 24 years old.
Wow.
So my grandmother, when she had passed away, she had left me $20,000. And so that's all I had. My parents, again, weren't wealthy, so I had this money. And I said, I'm going to buy this place. And I found several investors, and we all went in together to buy this place. We called it Park Bench and live acoustic music, and we turned it into a really happening, incredible spot, like right away. And now I went from $20,000 investment, I started making about $100,000 a year.
Wow,
I'm
amazing.
24 years old
Sure.
as this bar owner doing that. But then I started a nonprofit called the Phoenix Organization that raised money and volunteered for youth-focused charities. Because I wanted to make a difference. And so what happened was I was meeting all these people at the bars, getting them involved in the Phoenix to now raise money and impact youth-focused charities. So we started to do that. And that was pretty cool. And that's what led me to meet all these different influential people, which then led me to then run for city council.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, so that was sort of like the journey along.
So
that's like an early life that a lot of people don't know about,
Yeah,
right?
but there's an incubator inside of you. There's something there that other people wouldn't have seen the possibility of buying that restaurant.
Right.
Even if they had $20,000, they would have seen that $20,000 as the limit of what they had. You saw that as almost the fuel to create more.
Right.
And what do you think it was inside of you that allowed you to see a possibility that others would have never seen? Was it fear of failure? Was it vision? Like, I talked to a lot of people who have been incredibly successful, and for a lot of them, it's almost like they're driven by a fear that they might be poor or unsuccessful, and at the same time, other times they're driven by a passion for something they want to create. I mean, did you love the restaurant business?
No, I was naive enough to be successful, but more importantly, I had a desire to become more. That's what I think it is, a desire to become more, that I could do this, that I could become more in my life, that I could succeed. I think that's a drive. If I look back in the themes of my life, it's a desire to become more and do more and create more. Don't know, again, it hasn't always been healthy, right? But it's driven me to, and led to a lot of things.
I wonder if sometimes, people underestimate the power of sports,
right?
Because if you don't go play pro, it feels like, well, didn't you just waste your life playing basketball or football or lacrosse? But I wonder if some of that drive was nurtured and developed in your athletic environment,
right?
Developing confidence as a lacrosse player, realizing there are some things that if you worked hard enough, you could pull the skill sets together to get better and better, and then suddenly it translates into, quote, being an entrepreneur in the business world. Because I find that a lot of people think that successful people have opportunities that they didn't get.
Right.
But the reality is that those opportunities were available for so many people. But then there's that unusual person who's bartending, and that would have been a huge accomplishment.
Right.
Right. You didn't know anything about about spirits, and all of a sudden you're a bartender. So you could have been satisfied going, wow, I'm a bartender now.
Yep.
And yet you walk outside and you see something that has the potential to create a different future.
And I think part of that too, I remember thinking, there's got to be a better way I can make more money. People are coming to see me all the time at this bar I'm bartending at. Why shouldn't I make money if they're coming to see me at my own bar, right? So I should be the one who's bringing people to my own place rather than making money for this owner. I should become the owner myself. But what makes me think that I should be the owner in the first place? And I always believe that it's possible. I think that's the thing too, is I just have this belief that it's possible. Why not me? And why shouldn't it be possible? But I really believe in many ways that was instilled by my parents, because they really did instill in me that I could become anything. Again, they had many flaws in many ways, but they always had this belief that I could do anything and I can work hard. And playing sports, when I had to fight for my starting position all the time, even when I won the position, the next year it wasn't guaranteed. I had to fight for it again.
Right.
On the depth chart, they put another guy in front of me. I felt like I always had to fight for credibility, for that recognition. I always had to fight to prove myself. We see it in a lot of people, right? Tom Brady always has this desire, even now, to prove himself.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Coming out of college, they didn't think he could make it. Drew Brees, desire to prove himself, right? A lot of the great performers always feel like this. They have this desire to be great or to prove that they can do it.
And so you now have this restaurant.
Yeah.
And you go outside one day and you see a girl walking down the street.
Yeah. So after 3 weeks of being open, she's walking down the street and I saw her. It was love at first sight. For her, it took a few years, but for me, it was love at first sight. And that was Catherine. And I said, hey, come on in. I'm having a party. And she came in. There wasn't a party really, but she came in. We talked for a little bit. I said, well, I'm having a party Friday night. Come back. She goes, oh, okay. And she didn't come back. So about a week later, I'm at the Best of Atlanta charity event. And there she is. I saw her across the room. Like, that's her. Ran up to her. Remember me? She's like, yeah. She was eating cheesecake. She could care less that I was standing there in front of her. She said to this day, there was a guy she was talking to at that time, but I sort of just brushed him aside and moved him out of the way and just started talking to her. And said, you got to give me your number. I've got to take you out on a date. So she gave me her card, which really was just to blow me off and get rid of me at that time. But I called her up and finally she agreed to go out with me.
So there's already something inside of you that sees possibilities.
Even in that, right?
There's something inside of you that risks failure. Like you risk rejection.
Yes.
Because when you chase down a strange girl that doesn't know you from Adam and has no interest in you, and you still,
Right.
You refuse to not try,
Yeah.
and clearly you succeeded.
Right. Exactly.
Because I think sometimes people don't realize there's certain mental constructs that are formed inside of people who succeed. And you begin to see the incubator of those things early on in a person's life.
Right.
But there's also like a dark side, because you guys end up getting married.
Yeah.
And you ended up having a crisis where I have a quote here somewhere. It says, after being told you were negative and miserable and had to change by your wife. And I thought, wait a minute, this is so interesting, because I know Catherine too, and
Right.
and she's pretty straightforward.
She is straightforward.
So how long were you married before you ended up having this crisis in your own life and
The
marriage?
problem started even after, we started dating. I mean, we didn't have a great dating experience. It wasn't like this. At first it was. I should say at first it was really romantic and incredible. But very quickly my issues came up of jealousy, of not feeling like I was enough, unworthiness, just strange issues that really came up. And so we had a lot of issues. We had a lot of fights. I was not a great boyfriend or early husband. Small children. I was so focused at that point. Okay, I'm a driver. Mm-hmm. I want to perform. I want to succeed. Mm-hmm. The restaurant's going, but there's more that I have to do to provide for my family. And it's also not enough in my mind for what we need for our future. I don't see myself now as a restaurant owner for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? Went to law school right after Jade was born. That's probably not a good idea. Right. I left after a year and a half. I go work for a .com. And that's when it really came to a head. I'm working for this .com. I'm really negative. I'm not loving this job, even though I thought it was going to be great. Mm-hmm. Now I'm working for a company. I'm no longer my own boss.
Right.
I'm being told what to do. I'm a director of business development. And so I'm no longer my own boss. I have to go to an office every day. I lost my autonomy. My partners at that point were not being forthright with the income we're bringing in. My dividends are going down. I'm not as involved in the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So this thing where I love doing what I was doing, I'm now working and doing a job that I don't really love, but I felt like I was doing it to make my fortune. I thought I was going to make a fortune because I had 80,000 shares. This is during the .com. Everyone's getting funded. I'm making $100,000 a year at that time, which is a lot. This is 1998, 1999. I left law school to go do this, and it's not going well. So our marriage isn't going well. I'm not feeling him enough. We're fighting a lot. I'm being a jerk to her. I'm allowing the stress and the fear to make me into someone that I never wanted to be. And so in that moment, she had enough of my negativity. I was never abusive or anything, but she just had enough of my negativity, like always blaming and complaining about why my life was not the way it should be because of her. Mm-hmm. I was blaming her and the kids and the pressure and the stress. And she said, if you don't change, we're over. That's it. And that was the best wake-up call I ever got, because I wanted to stay married. I looked in the mirror. I didn't like who I was. I was like, where's that young guy who was so optimistic, who believed anything was possible? Now I'm living this world where I feel stuck. I have the house, I have this job. We moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Decided to move, sell my piece of the restaurant back to my partners. Moved down to Jacksonville. I'm working for this .com. And then I get fired by the company because they basically go under. Wow. So I made a lot of cuts. A lot of people got fired. They kept me on. Because I sold the NFL on NFL Wireless. NFL Wireless. We were the first company to help the NFL bring scores and data to wireless devices, which is
Thank you so much.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Now it's you expect it, right?
Yeah,
Let me get that on my phone right now. So we were the first to do that, actually. And so that experience, kept me going with the job because I sold the NFL, but I eventually lost the job when they ran out of money. I'll never forget losing the job. I turned pale white. How am I going to support my family? We just bought this house in Jacksonville. How am I going to make a living? Didn't know what to do. Second mortgaged our home, $20,000 in credit cards, and opened the first Moe's Southwest Grill burrito place in Florida. There was 5 at the time. We were the 5th, and there are now over 300 of those restaurants. But we opened that first Moe's, and the goal was to hopefully make enough money that would allow me to then to write and speak. Because at that point, after Catherine threatened to leave me, I remember saying, what am I born to do? Why am I here? I know I'm here for a reason. And why am I so miserable? And I realized I was so miserable because I wasn't living my purpose. And I went back to when I did the Phoenix organization. That's when I was happiest. Monthly meetings, speaking to the audience, rallying people together, making a difference in the community. That's when I felt best. It wasn't even owning the restaurants. It was doing the Phoenix, and that's what I loved the most. I said, okay, writing and speaking is sort of like that. I'll get to write, I'll get to speak, I'll get to make a difference and encourage people, inspire people the way I thought of people who inspired me years past. People like Ken Blanchard and the 1 Minute Manager and Richard Bach, Illusions, and Jonathan Livingston Seagull were books I read years ago, and those books inspired me. I said, okay, I want to do that. So that was about 2000, 2001 that I made a decision to do that, and then opened up the first restaurant to hopefully make enough money that would allow me to then do that.
And how did Mo's go?
Not good at first. Not good at first at all. We were almost bankrupt several times. We're running out of cash. We put everything we had. I violated all business plans. I had no savings. So we were trying to break even, make enough, and keep that money going as long as we could until we got more the next week. Out of the blue, I got a call from a friend who wanted to learn about wireless technology for his company. It was a friend of a friend. They called me up. Yeah, we know you sold wireless technology for this company. I said, I don't know about the technology, so I don't know if I can help you. They said, no, we want to just learn how to sell it. Just help us sell it. So they paid me $13,000 for 6 weeks of consulting. Came out of the blue. It was God. It was God. And we were carried during that time with that money. We lived off that money. And as that last dime ran out, the restaurant made its first profit. I'll never forget. And I just taught them about wireless technology. It was the easiest job that I ever had. And that supported us. And we made our first profit. And then shortly after that, I said, okay, I think I'm going to try to start writing and speaking now. And a woman was in my restaurant. Her name was Robin Wabi. She was the managing partner of New York Life Insurance. And I was talking to her. I was wearing, my outfit. No one thought I was the owner because I was only 29, 30 years old. And I'm wiping tables down. And I started talking to her. I said, well, I'm the owner of this place. She said, oh, great. I said, yeah, I'm a speaker. I'm a writer and speaker, just like I was a bartender. And she goes, oh, you should come speak to my company. I said, okay, great. And that was the first talk I ever gave, was to her company in Jacksonville.
Wow.
I tried to get out of it. She said, no, you have to give it. I talked about success is about the little things and about how people can drain your energy, which I called energy vampires, which was I would put in the energy bus later on. And that began this journey of now going, okay, maybe I could start writing and speaking. But Catherine will tell you, I just gave talks everywhere and anywhere. She'll tell you I wasn't very good. And I wasn't. But I was willing to, I guess, face rejection and failure just to get out and start doing it.
There's just so many people that find themselves so unhappy with the life that they've created. And they feel trapped, and it's unfulfilling. And and I think it's so important for people to realize that that's exactly how you felt, and that's where you were. But there's a way out of that.
Right.
But it doesn't come without risk. It doesn't come without some failure and maybe even some pain in the process.
It was a lot of pain, and it was a lot of risk, and there were failures along the way. But for me, not going for it, it wasn't an option. I had to, because I remember thinking, I feel like I'm dying every day instead of living. And I don't want to spend my life living this way. And I think too often people are comfortable and they don't want to go after the thing they truly want. A lot of times they get a job, they're making money, they really want to do something else, but now they have a job. They have a home, a mortgage. They have their wife, they have their kids. So then they basically trap themselves into living this life to support their family, and they blame their family for why they don't enjoy their life.
Yeah, that's right.
And I knew that I didn't want to do that. I had to go for it, failure or not. And Catherine was so great. We got to give her all the credit, because I remember saying, I'm going to go do this. And she said, let's go for it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I said, let's move to Jacksonville. She said, okay, let's go. We're young. If it doesn't work out, I said, let's open the restaurant. Okay, great. We might go bankrupt, but okay, it's all right. We'll figure it out. We'll find a way. So I think she was really more the optimistic one, because I would bounce ideas off of her, and she would say, okay, well, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. So she always seemed to have this willingness to say, let's go for it. Even at times when I didn't believe, she believed in many ways for us.
So it's interesting, because she didn't need security. She just needed you to be a better human being.
Wow, such a great point. Yes.
Right?
She wasn't looking for someone to make her safe.
Yeah.
She was looking for someone who loved her and treated her great.
Yeah. It's almost like she didn't need you to make her safe. She needed you to be safe, to be a safe person for her.
That's so good.
You know,
So true.
So this is about the time we meet.
Yeah.
Somewhere in here, or actually we interact on your podcast.
Yeah.
And my first memory of you is that you were an energy coach. I know that's not the language you use now, but at that time,
Yes.
that was a part of the dynamic. And I think it's because you were really aware of the negative effect of negative energy,
Right.
and of an unhealthy culture of pessimism and negativity and energy vampires.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think your own personal journey was a journey of fighting against the negative energy and pulling out of yourself positive energy. And at that time, you didn't really have a real personal understanding of who Jesus was, and there wasn't a sense of I don't think of personal faith, but you were more of a Buddhist in the way you described yourself. In fact, my first understanding of you is that you were a Jewish Buddhist energy coach. That's the way that you were described to me by your friend Daniel Decker.
Yeah. So I believed in God, and I always had this sense that God existed and that there was a God who loved me. So that's technically not Buddhist.
Right.
I technically believed in God.
Right, because Buddhism is an atheistic
Right.
philosophy.
And I believed in nothingness.
Right.
So I believed in God, and I remember laying on the grass at camp, looking up, and knowing that there was a God who loved me and that was watching me. And I would lay out and look at the stars at night, and I felt God's presence in those moments.
So the Buddhism part probably came from your language of energy.
My
Those
language of
times.
energy, and also I started practicing meditation.
Okay.
So I was doing meditation to try to find peace,
Right.
to try to find happiness, to try to find joy, because I couldn't find it. So I was looking for it in other things. I was a seeker. So that brought me to Buddhism, reading some books on Buddhism, which was about meditation, which again, in many ways was a blessing for my journey, because that Buddhism led me to meditate. And in those meditations, I started to find stillness and quietness, but it's also when God started to move through my life. So around that time, we wanted you on the podcast, or the show at the time. I was an energy coach because I was America's #1 energy coach.
Yeah, I remember
I was
that.
America's only energy coach, I think, at the time. And the whole idea was that I was going to coach people on their energy and help them with their positivity and negativity and just being their best. Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So that was my sort of branding initially. But the reason why I wanted to have you on is because Daniel Decker gave me a CD that you gave a sermon on, and it was Why I Follow Jesus. And so I listened to that sermon, Why I Follow Jesus, that was delivered by you, and it spoke to me for the first time. So for the first time, I had an understanding of this Jesus that people had talked about. I never knew much about Jesus. I never read the Bible. I never went to church, so I didn't know about Jesus. I knew about Christmas, the birth of Jesus. That's about it.
Sure.
So to me, Jesus was this prophet, teacher, as my mom said, that some thought he was the Messiah and some didn't. So I heard you talk about it, and that really spoke to me for the first time. So I wanted you on, I think, to talk about that. And the one question I remember I asked you is, if you don't believe in Jesus, or all the people who don't believe in Jesus going to hell?
Yeah, you kind of threw me under the bus in the middle of the interview.
Well, I really wanted to know that.
Okay.
But it wasn't that I was wondering about. I really wanted to know, because that's what I was probably struggling with. And I think most people who are seeking have that question, like, okay, is this the only way? And if I don't believe, am I going to hell? So it was this mindset of I was really asking more for me, because I wanted an understanding of how it all worked.
Yeah, the way I remembered is you said, Erwin, you're a Christian, right?
Right.
And I said, well, I'm a follower of Jesus. You said, yeah, so are only Christians going to heaven?
Right.
The rest of us are going to hell.
Right.
And I remember saying to you, John, Jesus said he did not come to condemn the world, but to bring the world life. And so I'm not going to take on what Jesus would. I'm not here to condemn the world. I'm here to bring the world life. And you paused and you said, oh, I like that answer.
I loved it. No, I remember the time I loved it. I was like, wow, okay, this guy's different. And that's a different thing I ever heard. I've never heard before about Jesus. So it really spoke to me at that point. And that's when my life began to really change in so many ways, like really began to change. And it was during that time where I started listening to your sermons, your messages, and I finally gave my life to Jesus. And it was 2006, 2007 when I gave my life to Jesus. So it was several years after I started writing and speaking. and I was speaking on positivity, energy, and yet I would go places and speak, and people would say, wow, like, I see God all over you. And one woman came up to me one time, I know you've been saved, I can tell. And I'm like, no, I haven't been saved. I don't need saving, I'm good. She goes, no, you've been saved. I'll never forget that. People would come up to me after these talks, and Daniel even said, John, I know one day you may never believe, and I'll still work with you. Because Daniel was very spiritual and very, had a strong faith, Christian faith. But I know one day you're going to be used by God to share his message. I just see it. And I didn't see it at the time, but he believed, he saw it. And I would say.
And that's before you actually even knew who Jesus was.
Yeah, that was before I knew who Jesus was. So here I was giving these talks, and people would come up to me and say that. And so God knew before I knew.
So I think this is almost like the tapping into your genius.
Yes.
Is that the reason people would come up to you and see God is because I think that by the way, it is to me so interesting that the whole idea of genius is a touch of the divine, that the ancient Greeks thought that a genie lived inside of people and that it was given by the gods.
Wow.
And so even before you come to faith, you're tapping into something that other people are identifying as, in a sense, divine or transcendent.
Yes.
And even though you may not call it that, there is, in a sense, a genius in the whole idea of positivity, which can be really played into almost like a superficial space of, just positive thinking or just trying to be, positive and not look at life in a real way. But when you look at the spectrum of the effect of cynicism or negativity, and you see the effect of optimism and of positive mindsets, there's no question that they create different kinds of worlds.
Right.
And so even before you became, quote, a person of faith, you had already begun to tap into the power of a positive mindset.
Right.
And again, I love the way you distinguish, because I obviously know a lot of the nuances of the way you see things, but you definitely distinguish between ignoring problems, and which is not being positive. That's being unrealistic. That's actually living in an illusion.
Right.
And I think the power of what you really try to bring people to is you can see the problem clearly from a positive mindset. And in fact, you may not be able to see it clearly without a positive mindset, because if you only have a negative mindset, all you see is the problem.
Right.
But when you come at a problem from a positive mindset, you begin to see the solutions and opportunities in that problem. So how did you begin?
And the lens in which you view the world. So,
that's right. It's the lens.
Yeah. But I want to go back to a second. I remember when I lost my job during the .com crash, and I remember crying out to God. I did cry out to God. God, help me. Provide for me and my family, God, and I will do your work. I remember saying those things to God. I remember when I lost my job, this incredible feeling came over me that said, everything happens for a reason. I heard the words, everything happens for a reason.
Wow.
So God was already working in my life with what I believe a plan he had for me. And I was tapping and tuning into that. So I was crying out for the first time. And that was what I call my surrender moment. Mm-hmm. And coming from my Jewish background, where Abraham had to surrender, I feel like that was my first covenant where I was surrendering to God. All right, God, I just trust in you. I don't know who Jesus is, but I know who you are, and I'm going to trust in you. And that's what happened. I started to trust in a greater way. So my positivity wasn't rooted in myself. Mm-hmm. It was rooted in a greater perspective, and a greater trust, and a greater faith, I would say. So I did have this optimism and belief. So it's the lens in which you view the world. And a lot of times we can look at it, and you talk about this as well, through the pessimistic lens. But pessimists do not change the world. Mm-hmm. Throughout history, it's the optimists, the believers, the dreamers, the doers. Those are the ones who have the greatest impact.
Yeah.
And so those are the ones we celebrate. The holidays we celebrate. We celebrate MLK Day, but Martin Luther King Jr. was inspired by Jesus and his faith that inspired him to do what he did in this world, right? So that's where I would say I started to find my genius. And it happened when I gave my life to God, when I surrendered, when I made Jesus my Savior. I mean, I look back, I knew I couldn't save myself. That's when I realized I needed a Savior, because I wasn't enough for myself. And I had been trying to do it all along by myself. Even though I trusted You're still trying to do it, like thinking, I got to do it, I got to do it, I got to do it. And then you realize, I can't do it alone. I really believe it's why every addiction program believes in a higher power.
Right.
Because you come to a point where you realize, I can't do this alone. My will isn't strong enough. I need greater strength. I need a greater power. And it's that greater strength, that higher power that gives you the strength you need. Well, I call that higher power Jesus.
Mm-hmm. No, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so good. John, I still remember in the middle of all that, you sent me an email that I've kept over the last decade. It was a very interesting explanation of your process. Can you talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah. I remember writing the email, and I love doing it. I remember listening to your sermons, asking God for a sign. If there is something to this Jesus, show me the signs. I'm open. Next thing you know, I started to see the signs everywhere I went. I saw literal signs that said Jesus is the answer. I'm driving down to Orlando. I'm looking to the left, and I hear, look. I turn to the right, and there's a big sign that says Jesus is the answer. And I said, that's for me. And it kept happening over and over and over again. So I went to go see a Buddhist energy healer. I was having health problems with my stomach. And I told him the signs I've been seeing. I said, what do you make of that? He said, John, yeah. He said, it makes sense. Jesus takes our heavy vibrational energy. He said, you can't connect to a perfect, harmonious, energetic God if you have this heavy energy. Jesus takes it. He called it soul pain. He takes your soul pain. He goes, Christians call it sin, so you can connect. I said, can I take someone else's soul pain? He said, can you handle your own?
Wow.
He said, Christianity is like spiritual cheating. All you do is believe and receive, and you're there. You believe and Jesus takes it. He said, me? He goes, I want to see if I can attain enlightenment on my own. I want to do it myself. And I walked out of there going, this guy's got the answer. He just made so much sense. I believed in a God that would want to save me, that would want to take my burden, that would want to take my pain. It made so much sense. And I walked out of there saying, okay, I'm going to give this Jesus a shot. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I wrote you an email telling you what had happened with the Buddhist energy healer and all this. You're probably like, what is going on? But you read that letter in your next sermon the following week, because I was listening every week. You were one of the first to do a podcast sermon years ago. We're talking probably 15 years ago now, 16 years ago, that you were doing that. And I'm listening, and you start reading my letter. I'm like, he's reading my letter. That was just to him. But you read my letter, and that started our relationship, which was funny that you read my letter, because I reached out and said, hey, I'm coming out to LA. I'd love to come by. And I came by, and then you asked me to speak one time at your service to tell my story. And I'll never forget what you said. God will use all means to connect to you. And John is a great example, because he used a Buddhist energy healer. He used you. He used the signs. He used all these people along the way to reach out to me, to try to connect with me. And I always believed that there would be a God that would want to do that. And I believe that that's God's nature to do that.
That's so good. All right, I'm going to kind of shift our conversation a little bit, and we're going to talk a little about the genius in you.
Okay.
And at the same time, I want to give you an opportunity to help unlock and awaken the genius in everyone who's listening, because I know that's one of your passions. And given that, you know, when I walked into the Nike store years ago, and I saw the sign, everyone is an athlete, or if you have a body, you're an athlete. And I'm like, yes and no, right? Right? You know, and, because I have a body, and but I'm not as athletic as I used to be.
Right.
And so the way I kind of mapped that in my mind is, everyone has a body, maybe an athlete, but they're not an Olympian.
Right.
And so we recognize that there are some people who have a unique expression of a particular gift, talent, genius. And so we can identify those more easily. We can see that Steph Curry is a great shooter, or that LeBron James is an incredible athlete. And it's kind of funny, because then you have fans yelling at other athletes on the court, telling them they're bums, that they're not any good. Right. I'm thinking, those are the best athletes in the world.
Right.
Like the worst basketball players on the court are the best athletes in the world. Oh, yeah. But in the spectrum of being compared to Michael Jordan or being compared to Kobe Bryant, they look like they're not as good.
Right.
And it's the same way with with Picasso, right? There may be a lot of great painters, but then when you put them next to Picasso, they look mundane or they look average. And certainly when you put me against a world-class athlete or a world-class whatever,
I look mundane. It's the same way with that sense of genius. And so I know oftentimes, because you're always measuring yourself against the better development of who you are becoming. You don't really compete with other people. You're competing with yourself. You're trying to become the best version of Jon Gordon. And you would never call yourself a genius, but I can tell you that people all over the world have seen genius in you and have been affected by that genius in your life. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of fun questions. One, if you could have a genius in any realm in life, where would you want to have that genius expressed?
If I could have any genius.
Any genius, right? What would it be?
It would probably be an NBA player to have that gift of genius to shoot like Steph Curry and have that kind of game.
That's a pretty enviable.
You feel that way too?
Well, I would I would love to come back in another life as Steph Curry. That'd be pretty amazing. But I'm inspired by so many people as you are. But probably my most iconic historic genius is Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
Because to me, he was a futurist.
Right.
And then I realized I'm sort of historically attracted to people who have a particular genius, but they apply toward the future.
Right.
I mean, Da Vinci is designing helicopters and submarines, and
which is unbelievable.
He's designing before there's even technology imaginable, right, to be able to create those things, which shows me that you can have genius that's out of time. His genius was out of time because we had not developed as human beings to the place where we're capable of actualizing his genius.
That's because time is a human construct, but genius is actually beyond space
beyond
and time.
It's transcendent in that sense. And I see so many like artists, like whether it's Monet or Raphael or that their art oftentimes is either looking backwards, looking at what is and giving a fresh interpretation. But like Picasso seemed to be a futurist who not only saw what was, but saw what no one else could see. And I think about that even in like music or like who are the artists in that particular field that are not just creating beyond our imagination, but are also almost like guiding us into a future we haven't imagined yet.
Wow.
So
where would the artists of, say, the 80s be in terms of when you listen to like 80s rock, like kids even today love that kind of music. That was the kind of music I grew up with. And kids today now love that music. That music is in many ways genius, how it's impacting people even to this day. My friends love Pearl Jam. Led Zeppelin. You look at that, like those guys were clearly geniuses, would you say, in terms of, and their rock transcends, maybe not forever, but certainly their generation.
Yeah, like I was on my bike the other day and I always have conversations with myself. And so the person in my head asked this question: if you have only one soundtrack to take into eternity, which one would it be?
Right.
And for me, it was the Beatles.
Wow.
And because I look at the scope of the Beatles' genius, you can experience music like I Love You, Yeah, which is like just fun and light, or you can go to Yellow Submarine, or you can go to Magical Mystery Tour, you can go to the White Album, and you realize that their music kept evolving and it feels like it was transcendent. It was always creating something that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And I'm really drawn to that in time and history.
I want to say, just talking about genius, people always say, who do you think is a genius? I think you are a genius because I think about the work that you've done over the years, and you were the pioneer in this kind of modern Christian expression of the gospel, reaching people in a very modern way, in a very hip way, in a very cool way. You look at now, you see Stephen Furtick, you see Rich Wilkerson, Judah Smith, all these people, they're doing what you did years ago, right? I mean, you were doing this years and years and years ago. You were meeting in nightclubs and no one was doing that. So you saw something before anyone else did. Now everyone accepts it as normal.
Yeah.
But I think people forget that you were doing that from the very beginning of this movement. Like you started this movement. You made Christianity modern cool. And you were doing it before there were skinny jeans. So, I mean, if you really think about it. So I wanted to say that because that to me is genius. Like you saw the future where it was going to reach people in a very modern way. And I always think about that because I just came from a church where I was speaking and it was a very creative church. And I even brought you up in my talk. I said, before this church wouldn't even be here if Erwin McManus wasn't preaching the gospel in the way he did and sharing the message in the way he did. And I believe all modern churches need to understand who the pioneer was, and it was you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I know you don't like to hear that. You're so humble, you don't want to hear that, but I have to say that because that's truth.
Yeah, I remember one time I said to this really influential global pastor, because he invited me on his TV show, and I said, today's heresy is tomorrow's orthodoxy. And he looked at me and he goes, I hope not. And I think the reality is that sometimes our genius comes out because we're the outsider. And we just see things in a new and fresh and unique way. And but I want to go back to talk a little bit about your genius. And, all right, you can't escape it. You've written books on positive leadership. You've written books on positive teams, and you definitely have been branded and marked in the world of positive space. Like, what do you see as the genius of positivity? Like, what do you think actually happens when a person begins to make that shift?
The genius of positivity is believing in someone or something, and that person's belief or your belief in them helps them become more than they ever thought possible. Like, I think of Dabo Sweeney as a leader and a football coach, but his belief in his team and his players, they accomplished more than they ever thought possible. So when you believe, leadership is a transfer of belief. And so when you believe in someone, they rise up and accomplish more than they thought possible. You help them reach not just their potential, but even higher than perhaps what their potential is or what they think it to be. So you move beyond the limits of what's possible into areas that people thought were impossible. So for me, that's what I think is the genius of positivity, helping people become all that they're meant to be, helping them do things that they never thought that they could do or would do. And just the idea that optimism, like research from Duke University shows that optimists work harder, get paid more likely to succeed in business and sports. And why? Well, the researchers found because they believed in a brighter and better future. They took the actions necessary to create it.
You know, it reminds me of this one statement in the Bible that has always been one of my favorite declarations, where this guy says to Jesus, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. And that one really strikes me because, like, I believe, but I need help in my unbelief.
Yes.
And I wonder if what you're really talking about, you're talking about the transfer of belief, it's right there. It's a person has to want to believe.
Right.
You can't impose belief on them. But at the same time, there is the sense where it's not just you're helping people do what they didn't know they could do. I wonder if there's even something more transcendent than that or metaphysical than that, where there are certain things I wouldn't be able to do without your belief added to my life.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
You know?
Well, I mean, for me, I wouldn't be able to be what I am without God's belief in me or my faith in God and that trust and belief. I believe that God believes in all of us in a certain way and calls out the genius and wants to call it. I believe God sees our genius and wants us to realize that genius. Too often, we don't think God can do it, or we don't believe we're worthy. And so that's why we don't receive the gifts and the plan that God has for us. That's what I believe. So just like that, I believe from a human standpoint, when I see something in you, or I believe in you, that you're right, there's something transcendent where that belief, that confidence, that energy somehow is transferred, that, wow, someone believes I could do that. Okay. I don't know what it is or how it works, but you're right, there is a transfer.
So when you're in the room, something changes.
Yes.
And you know this.
Yes.
Like, you know that when you're in the room, something is added to the room that wasn't there before you walked into the room.
Yes.
That's, to me, what your genius is. So one of the questions I used to get to ask CEOs when I was younger, when I would get to be in the room, I would say, what is it? What's the one thing that makes you different than everyone else? What's the one thing that you're bringing that makes you the CEO of this Fortune 500 company? What is that one thing that allowed you to take this company from 0 to $500 million or whatever it is?
Right.
Like, Jon Gordon, like, in the most objective way, because you know yourself.
Right.
Like, what's the thing that surprises you? Because I think when you do discover your genius, you're actually surprised by it. You're
right.
Like, you're almost in shock that this is something that exists inside of your soul.
Right.
What is that thing that you would definitely say God has placed it in you, but what's the one thing that you think when you enter the room, this is what you're bringing?
I am surprised that I do make an impact the way that I do, because I never knew I could. And it was really after I found my faith, that's when I started to realize that genius. I don't know what it is. I don't know what happened. But when I started to live from that incredible faith and trust and confidence, I became someone who could then inspire others, encourage others. So I'm surprised that I do get to work with Clemson, that a coach like Dave Roberts will bring me in, a manager, to speak to his team, the Dodgers, and watch that team become a World Series champion, to go speak to the Miami Heat and guys resonate with it and then play better because of it. The Tampa Bay Lightning, speaking to them during training camp, and they win the Stanley Cup that year. I'm surprised that those kind of things happen, right? And I'm able to do something that sticks with them and allows them to then perform at a higher level. I'm not the reason, right. I know that, but I'm surprised that I do bring something that they'll say later on, wow, the energy you brought, like we're still talking about it to this day.
What is that something?
I think it's belief. I think it's encouragement. I think it's seeing the world through childlike faith. Because I have childlike faith. Why not us? And to believe that it's possible. But it's funny because a lot of times I'll believe in others more than maybe I believe in myself. But I'm really good at encouraging others. I want to see people succeed. I root for people to be successful. So, and I'm not jealous of someone who maybe have more success than me. Like Patrick Lencioni, who wrote a book, 5 Dysfunctions, would technically be more successful in terms of that book than the Energy Bus. Although we always go neck and neck, but like I see him being successful, and I love watching him do what he does in his way. I don't think I was always like that. I think when I was younger, I was jealous. When I would see success, I got jealous. But as I get older, I made a decision. Even seeing you and your gifts and talents, I go, wow, Erwin, I can't be Erwin. Like what he does on stage, the way he shares that message, I can't be that. But I can be me. And I can only be me. I can be the best version of me and just do what I'm called to do and focus on my own geniuses of whatever that is. So I guess I'm surprised by that, but I guess my genius is, the encouragement and the transfer of belief and energy into others that allows them to believe that they can go do it.
It's so good. So someone's listening right now and they want desperately to believe that there's some genius inside of them, something unique, something that in a sense is like a fingerprint of God in them that they're supposed to bring as a gift to the world. But they just can't, it's trapped under the rubble of unbelief or failure or self-doubt. Could you give them a couple of steps to begin to step toward that genius?
We all have it. Like it's to know that you have it inside of you, that God placed that inside of you. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be scared of it. And know that you're worthy. Like you are worthy. There's a calling on your life. There's a purpose that you have. And so you should feel worthy. But the key is honestly, take the first step. Like I never knew I could write a fable. And I remember walking and praying, and the idea for the Energy Bus came to me. And once it did, I sat down, I started writing. I didn't go, I don't know how to write. I can't write a book. I said, all right, I'm going to sit and try to write this book and see if I can. It just came. The idea just came. So I literally sat down every day and wrote this book. I don't know what kind of genius that is, but I have a genius where I'm able to write a book in 3.5 to 4 weeks in a short amount of time. But I write every single day. But the first step was to actually sit down and start writing. Not knowing if it was going to be good or not. I wasn't looking for a publisher. I just started doing the work. And I think that's the key, is just take the first step. And sometimes you take the first step without really believing, but you just take the first step. Being willing to fail. Being willing to face rejection. And you take the first step. So I think that's the first key. You take the first step. Then as you start doing the work, then the key, I believe, is to start actually believing that you can do it. And I think with the work comes a little bit more confidence and belief that, okay, this can be done. And then it's to recognize what your gifts are, what your talents are, to understand what those gifts and talents are. Like I know that even though I teach leadership, my gift is not necessarily in running an organization. I know that's not my main calling. So I'm not going to spend my life trying to run an organization. I'm here to share the message of positive leadership, but I know I need to find someone to run my organization and use their gifts. So I'm really good at delegating with people who have gifts that I don't have. So I think it's recognizing what your gifts are, what your purpose is, what your calling is. What energizes you is a big part of it too. Like, what do you love to do? Because if you don't love it, you'll never be great at it. So I think the key is to really find what is it that you love to do in your life and find ways to do that. Because if you spend your life doing something you don't really love, you're not really going to become great. I recognize that the restaurant business wasn't for me forever because I asked myself, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? I'm really good at it. I was good at the restaurant business. We were successful. Even when I opened up Moe's, I eventually had 4 Moe's. So we were making money. Do I want to open 10? Do I want to open 20? Do I want to have 100 restaurants 10 years, 20 years from now? No. I know that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I don't love it. So I was willing to let go of that, sold them, go into the unknown of saying, okay, now I'm going to write and speak full time and living off that money as it's running out. And then the idea for the energy bus comes to me. So I was willing to just say, I'm not great at this. I'm good at this. I don't love this. What I'm going to focus on what I do love, even though it may not succeed. And I think that's the key too, is doing what you love. Am I missing anything here?
No, this is so good, because one of the things I tell people is a lot of times we prepare for failure, but we don't really prepare for success.
Wow.
So if you have all the success in the world, will this create the life you want?
Right.
And most of the time the answer is no. and I think that's where you've made adjustments in your life.
Yes.
You had different levels of success, but ultimate success in those arenas would not have created the life you wanted.
Right. And even now, I know very clearly that I'm not willing to take this on and that on because it won't lead to what I ultimately want to do and continue doing. So you don't want the kind of success that actually imprisons you.
That's right.
Because you build a bigger and bigger organization, for instance, and next thing you know, you're not doing what you love anymore. So what good is that? So I very clearly keep in mind, okay, I want to continue to do this, I want to do this, and I'm not going to worry about doing that. Too often we're taking on more and more projects, and then we become miserable. I was with a guy the other day, and he was talking about like the pressure he feels because he has a very wealthy wife from a wealthy family, and he feels like he can't live up to that. I'm like, but you're so successful in what you're doing here. Are you loving what you're doing? Yes, I'm loving what I'm doing. He's like, I'm more successful than I ever thought I'd be. I've made more money in my life already than I ever thought I would make. I said, so then what are you worried about? Enjoy what you have right now and just keep doing what you're doing. Why are we worried about anything else?
That's so good.
And that's the way I feel too with my life. Like I've already accomplished more than I ever thought I would in my life growing up. And I make more in a speech now than my parents made all year in their work. That surprises me in my life. And knowing that, I know that the rest of my life, I just have to continue doing what I'm supposed to do. And that's writing books, speaking, and hopefully developing leaders around the world.
Oh, it's a beautiful. Just one last question, just for fun. What's one thing in your future that you would love to be able to be a part of or get to do?
Yeah, so in
Just
my
just
future,
dreaming.
just dreaming, definitely would love to make a movie based on one of my books. Training Camp, most likely, or The Hard Hat, about a young man, a true story, who died on the field and got hit in the chest by a ball and died, and yet has left an incredible legacy in so many lives because of the kind of teammate he was. And so I think doing a movie would be something on my list. But again, I find, as I've already tried to go down that road, it hasn't worked so far, but I'm not deterred. I just know the timing isn't right.
That's just the story of your life, though.
Yeah, the timing isn't right. And I'm not going to push it. When it's meant to be, it will be. But I'm going to keep on waiting and looking and seeing when is that right time, because I know it will happen, just about when.
Yeah, you're a blend of, if it's meant to be, it will be,
Right.
but you're also if it's meant to be, I'm going to work my butt off
Exactly.
to make it happen.
Right. I'm going to do the work and then trust at the same time.
Yeah.
Because if there's if I'm in the movie, if I'm in the room with a movie producer, I'm going to mention it and have this idea, but I'm also not going to push it either, because it isn't my primary focus. But I would love to do a movie. And like Damian Lillard wrote, a great quote for the back of Training Camp, my book. And so I've talked to him about like this book, and if he said, yeah, I would be an executive producer of this in a heartbeat. All right, great, let's do this. Let's make this into a movie. That might spearhead and say, okay, let's go do this. So you never know. It's like, it's not that I'm content because I'm not content. I really want to continue doing the work that I'm doing. So you think my genius, if this is, this is all about genius. You think my genius is my positivity, my encouragement? Is it in any of the book? Is it in the book writing or the process of writing a book? Would you say?
See, I think all your books are motivated by your desire to inspire. And so all the fables you create, they have an underlying narrative. You're trying to figure out how to get the most out of the people who are reading the book.
Right.
And it's every book is you having a one-on-one mentoring session with a person through a story, through a fable, to try to help them remove or unlock negative mindsets that keep them from living the life they're created to live. I think that you're a person who is running through a prison with 1,000 keys to unlock every prison door you can to set everybody free. And I think that's the genius of Jon Gordon, is you believe everyone has more than they know. It bothers you that people don't know how much is in them. And you know that by speaking into their life, you can liberate greatness.
And what you just said is why I think I love Jesus so much, and why you bringing Jesus to life for me is such a huge part of my life, because to truly unlock the door and give freedom, what is Jesus is the answer to that. He is the key that brings you the freedom that you want. So as I'm trying to bring freedom in life, what's the ultimate answer? It's Jesus. And yes, I can talk about positivity, which is important and leads people in the right direction, but ultimately to really help them be free, it's Jesus. Only one came to heal your soul, and it's Jesus. And so that's pretty cool what you just said. I get it now. It's like, it makes so much sense. Like, I feel like I know myself better now with that. This is great therapy.
Jon, it's been so good. Man, I just love the fact that we've had this time to talk about the genius of Jon Gordon. And I just pray that your genius would impact millions of people across the world as they discover the uniqueness that God has placed in them too.
I love that. When I'm on stage, I always say, the genius is in the audience. I always say it's not right here, right now. The genius is in the audience. And it's our job to unleash the genius in them. And that's why I'm so excited that you're doing this and your book as well, because it's going to really unleash the genius in so many people. People who don't realize that they have that genius within them. It's going to help them find it and live it. And that's going to help them live their best life. So I can't wait to share it.
No, and that's why I'm excited about the genius of Jesus and the people who are going to read it and lives are going to be impacted by it. I'm
Incredible.
excited.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Hey, thanks so much for being on the episode.
Thank you.
All right. God bless.
God bless.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Jon Gordon is such an extraordinary human being, and I want to encourage you to learn more from him. Pick up his newest book, Row the Boat, or go back to the beginning and pick up the Energy Bus. Or if you want to hear Jon get into my brain and put it on paper and have a conversation about faith and spirituality, pick up The Garden. Jon Gordon has so many resources available, and I want you to take full advantage of them. And by the way, I want to remind you that my book, The Genius of Jesus, releases on September 14th. So if you haven't already pre-ordered it, pre-order right now. Order some for your friends, or start a book club. We're going to be leading and guiding book clubs across the world, specifically during the month of October. And if you're watching this on YouTube, would you leave a comment? Let us know what you think. Let us know what has inspired you the most. And if you have different people you'd love for me to interview or subjects you'd like for us to address around the idea of unlocking human creativity, genius, then let me know. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll see you next week on The Genius of.